Most people think silence is peaceful, but in the Powell house, silence is how you know you are being punished. It started the afternoon I refused to co-sign a $55,000 loan for my brother's new truck. I thought I was protecting my credit score, but I was actually breaking an unwritten rule. In this family, you don't say no. Now, the quiet isn't empty, it is heavy, organized, and it is trying to break me. The rain in Lake Haven, Ohio, always smelled like wet pavement and old pennies. It was a scent I had grown to love over the last 6 years because it smelled like my own life. It smelled like the small second-floor apartment I paid for with my own money, the Honda Civic parked outside that I owned outright, and the quiet. Boring stability I had clawed my way toward after a 20s decade defined by chaos. At 33 years old, I finally had a positive net worth. It was not a fortune. It was a number on a spreadsheet that I checked every Friday night with a glass of cheap Merlot, watching the cells turn green instead of red. That spreadsheet was my diary. It told the story of student loans paid off, credit card debt suffocated, and an emergency fund that could sustain me for exactly 3 months if the marketing firm where I worked suddenly folded. I was the responsible one. That was my role in the Powell family script. My brother, Evan, was the dreamer, the charmer, the one who had big ideas that required other people's capital. My sister, Tessa, was the artist, the emotional turbulence who needed constant validation, and I was the bank, or the safety net, or the janitor. The title shifted, but the job description remained the same. Fix it when they break it. My phone buzzed against the granite countertop. It was Evan. I hesitated. It was a Tuesday evening, which usually meant he wanted to borrow $50 for gas or vent about a boss who did not understand his genius. But his voice, when I answered, was vibrating with a manic sort of energy I recognized instantly. "Ruby, you are not going to believe this," he said. "I finally got the break. That is great." "Evan," I said, leaning against the counter. "What kind of break? A real job? Construction management? Well, site oversight, but the potential for growth is huge. The guy running it said I am exactly the kind of guy they need. Leadership material." I smiled, genuinely hoping this was true. Evan was 31. He had started and stopped 4 careers in the last 5 years. "I am happy for you." I said, "Really, there is just one thing," he said, and the air in my kitchen seemed to thin out. "To be a site manager, I have to look the part. I cannot pull up to these high-end client meetings in my beat-up sedan. It is a requirement. Ruby, I need a truck." My stomach tightened. "A truck, not a used sedan. A truck. Okay," I said slowly. "Do you have a down payment saved?" "I have found the perfect one." He rushed on, ignoring my question. "It is a beauty. Heavy duty, leather interior, towing package. It shows them I mean business. The dealership is practically giving it away. It is $55,000. I nearly dropped my wine glass. $55,000? Evan, that is more than you made in the last 2 years combined. You are looking at the past. Ruby, you have to look at the future potential. This job pays well. I will have that paid off in no time. But look, here is the snag. My credit score is still dinged up from that medical bill thing last year, and the dealership system is being weird. It is a clerical thing. They said I just need a co-signer to get the lowest rate. Just a formality. A clerical thing. The words hung in the air, heavy and false. I walked over to my laptop, opened it, and stared at my budget spreadsheet. "Evan," I said, keeping my voice level, $55,000 is a massive loan. What is the interest rate without a co-signer? They won't even run it without one. He lied. I knew he was lying because that is not how dealerships work. "Come on, Ruby. I am turning my life around here. Do you want me to lose this job because I drive a piece of junk? I am not saying that. I said, I am asking practical questions. What is the term length? What is the monthly payment? Have you quoted the insurance yet? Trucks are expensive to insure." He let out a sharp, exasperated breath. Why do you always have to be the banker? I call you with good news, life-changing news, and you immediately start talking about insurance. This is why people think you are cold. Ruby, I am not being cold. I said, I am being an adult. Send me the details, the real details, the VIN number, the interest rate, the term. I will just see you at the dealership tomorrow, he said, his tone shifting from defensive to presumptuous. Pine Ridge Motors, 5 o'clock. Don't make me wait. Ruby, this truck won't last. He hung up before I could say no. 10 minutes later, my mother called. The Powell family communication network was faster than fiber optics. Evan had clearly called Sharon Powell immediately, spun a narrative about his cruel, unsupportive sister, and deployed her as the heavy artillery. Hi, Mom, I said, sinking onto my couch. Ruby, honey, she began. Her voice was warm, the kind of warmth that feels like sunlight right before a sunburn. Evan sounds so excited. It is wonderful to hear him this happy, isn't it? It is good he is excited. Mom, but $55,000 is a lot of money. It is an investment, she corrected. You know, when you were struggling after college, when you needed to move back home for 6 months. Your father and I never asked you for a business plan. We just opened the door, because that is what family does. We lift each other up. I closed my eyes. I knew this script. I knew every beat of it. I paid rent when I lived with you, I said softly, and I bought my own groceries. That is not the point, she said, her voice hardening, the ice creeping in at the edges. The point is that we were there for you. Now your brother has a chance to make something of himself. And you are acting like he is asking for a kidney. He just needs a signature. Ruby, he's going to pay for the truck. He just needs your good name to get started. Don't be selfish. I am not being selfish. I said, co-signing makes me legally responsible for the debt. Mom, if he misses a payment, the bank comes after me. It ruins my credit. You have such little faith in him, she said. It breaks my heart. We raised you to look out for each other. Just go look at the truck. For me? She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the smell of rain drifting in through the window screen. I opened my laptop again and navigated to a credit monitoring site. I logged in and stared at my score. 780. It was a beautiful number. It represented safety. It represented the fact that I did not owe anyone anything. But as I stared at the screen, a memory clawed its way up from the back of my mind, vivid and sharp. I was 24. Evan was 22. He had wanted an apartment in the city, a loft that was far too expensive for a barista, but he had sworn his photography business was about to take off. He begged me to co-sign, just a formality. He had said then, too. I had almost done it. I had the pen in my hand. But at the last second, I hesitated. I didn't sign. 3 months later, Evan was evicted. He had thrown a party that resulted in 2 broken windows and a hole in the drywall, and he had never paid a single month of rent. Our parents ended up draining their emergency savings to pay the landlord to avoid a lawsuit. If I had signed that lease, that debt would have been mine. I would have spent my 20s paying for a party I didn't even attend. I made a promise to myself that day, standing in the wreckage of his apartment while he shrugged and said it wasn't a big deal. I promised I would never sign my name to a debt I could not pay off comfortably with the cash currently in my checking account. I did not have $55,000 in my checking account. The next day, the sky over Lake Haven was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that wouldn't break. Pine Ridge Motors was located on the strip of highway just outside of town, flanked by a fast food taco joint and a discount mattress warehouse. Rows of polished trucks sat under aggressive halogen lights, gleaming like oversized jewels. I parked my Civic and took a breath. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but I looked professional. Blazer, dark jeans, boots. I needed to look like I knew what I was doing. I saw Evan before he saw me. He was standing next to a massive charcoal gray pickup truck that looked large enough to crush my car without noticing. He was talking to a salesman, a man in a shiny blue suit who was laughing too hard at something Evan said. When I approached, Evan's face lit up. There she is, the financial wizard. The salesman turned. He had a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked me up and down, assessing the quality of my shoes, my bag, my posture. He decided instantly that I was the mark. Ms. Powell, he said, extending a hand. Rick, great to meet you. Evan here has been telling me how close you two are. It is rare to see siblings support each other like this. I shook his hand briefly. Nice to meet you. I am just here to look at the numbers. Rick? Of course, Rick said, guiding us toward the glass-walled office. The truck is a beauty, isn't it? Top of the line. Your brother has great taste. We sat at a round desk. Rick didn't look at Evan. He looked at me. He slid a piece of paper across the desk, face down, and rested his hand on it. Now, we got Evan approved based on the joint application. Rick said, we just need to finalize a few signatures, and I can have the keys in his hand in 20 minutes. I haven't agreed to a joint application. I said, I am here to review the proposal. Turn the paper over, please. Rick's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he flipped the paper. I pulled it toward me. I took a pen from my purse, my own pen, and began to read. Evan shifted in his chair. Ruby, you don't need to read all the fine print. Rick explained it all to me. It is standard stuff. I ignored him. My eyes scanned the lines. Sale price, $55,000. Interest rate, 12%. Term, 84 months. I felt a cold prickle of shock, 12%. With a co-signer who had a credit score near 800, Rick, I said, looking up, why is the APR 12%? With my credit tier. This should be half that. Rick shrugged. A smooth practice gesture. Market rates are tough right now. Ms. Powell. Plus, because the primary driver has a thin file. The risk assessment bumps it up. But listen, you can always refinance in 6 months. That is what I tell everyone. Date the rate. Marry the truck. I looked back down at the paper. I followed the columns to the bottom. Total amount financed, $68,000. Wait, I said, the truck is 55. Why is the total 68? I ran my finger down the itemized list. There it was. Service contract, $3,000. Tire and wheel. Protection, $1,200. Gap insurance, $1,500. Key replacement strategy, $800. You packed the loan. I said, my voice flat. You added $10,000 of dealer add-ons. Evan leaned forward, looking confused. No, Rick said those came with the truck. He said it was the platinum package. They are optional. Evan, I said, and they are charging you interest on them for 7 years. Rick leaned back. Crossing his arms, his friendly demeanor evaporated. Look, those products protect the investment. If you drive off the lot and hit a nail, you will be thanking me. I looked at the monthly payment. $940. Evan, I said, turning to my brother, can you afford $940 a month? Plus insurance, which will be another $200 at least? Plus gas? Evan's face was red. He looked at Rick, then at me. I told you. The job pays well, and I can refinance later. Stop trying to embarrass me. Ruby, just sign the paper. I did the math in my head. 84 months, 7 years. Evan would be paying for this truck until he was 38 years old. He would pay nearly double the truck's value by the time he owned it. I placed the paper back on the desk. No, I said. The silence in the small glass office was deafening. Excuse me? Rick said. I am not co-signing this. I said, it is a predatory loan. The term is too long. The rate is insulting, and you have packed it with junk fees. Evan stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. Ruby, what are you doing? I stood up too. I am protecting you. Evan, this is a bad deal. If you want a truck, let's go look at the used lot. We can find a reliable F-150 for $25,000. I will help you look. I will help you make a budget to save for a down payment so you do not have to borrow so much. but I am not signing this. You don't want me to have anything, Evan shouted. His voice cracked, loud enough that heads turned in the showroom. You can't stand seeing me succeed. You always have to be the one with the money, the one with the power. You want me to stay broke so you can feel superior. That is not true, I said, keeping my voice low. I want you to be financially healthy. This loan will drown you. You are drowning me, he yelled. He pointed a finger in my face. You are selfish. Mom was right. You only care about your precious credit score. You don't care about family. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the anger. He knew he couldn't afford this. He knew it was a bad idea. But he wanted the toy, and he wanted the image, and he wanted me to be the safety net that caught him when he fell. I am leaving, I said. I walked out of the glass office. I walked past the gleaming trucks. If you walk out that door, Evan screamed after me. Don't expect us to be waiting for you on Christmas. I kept walking. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I got into my Civic, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched Evan standing in the dealership window, gesticulating wildly to Rick, who was now looking at him with open annoyance. I started the car and drove home. The drive was a blur of wet asphalt and red taillights. When I got back to my apartment, I walked inside and locked the door behind me. The silence of my home usually felt peaceful. Tonight, it felt like a waiting room. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the family group chat, titled Powell Peeps, which included my parents, Evan, Tessa, and me. I typed a message. I know everyone is upset. I want Evan to have a good job, but I cannot co-sign a loan that size. The terms were predatory. I am happy to help him look for something affordable. I hit send. I watched the screen. Read by Mom. Read by Dad. Read by Tessa. No one replied. The bubbles did not appear. I went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. My hands were shaking. I told myself I did the right thing. I told myself that math does not care about feelings. A 12% loan on a depreciating asset is a financial death sentence. My phone buzzed. I looked down. You have been removed from Powell Peeps. I stared at the notification. It felt like a physical slap. Removed. Not argued with. Not yelled at. Erased. I opened my text thread with my father. Glenn. Dad? I typed. The message status changed to read instantly. No reply. I went to Facebook. I clicked on my sister Tessa's profile. Her latest status update, posted 3 minutes ago, was a text block against a black background. Some people claim they love you, but when you actually need them, they show their true colors. Money reveals character. So grateful for the ones who actually stay. Family first, fake people. Underneath it, my mother had commented, Amen, honey. We hold on to the ones who matter. Evan had liked the comment. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I didn't even bother with a chair. I just slid down the cabinets until I hit the tile. The shame hit me first, hot and prickly. Had I been selfish? Was $55,000 really that much money in the grand scheme of a lifetime? Maybe I should have just done it. Maybe I should have risked it to keep the peace. Then came the grief. They were talking about me. They were all talking to each other, right now, agreeing that I was the villain. I was the bad guy in the story of Evan's heroic rise. But then, I looked at the refrigerator. Held up by a magnet was a picture of me at 24, standing in that empty apartment I had almost co-signed for, looking terrified because I had just realized how close I came to ruin. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I stood up. I walked over to the counter where I kept a small notepad for grocery lists. I picked up a pen. I wrote 3 sentences. I love them. I am not signing my future away. I will not chase silence. I tore the page off and stuck it to the fridge, right next to the photo. The phone remained silent. The rain tapped against the window, steady and indifferent. I turned off the kitchen light and walked into the living room, leaving the darkness behind me. I knew, with a sinking certainty, That the silence was not just a reaction, it was a strategy, and it was just beginning. The silence that followed my removal from the group chat was not a passive absence of noise. It was an active, suffocating presence, like a heavy wool blanket thrown over a birdcage. For the first 3 days, I checked my phone every time it buzzed, my heart doing a hopeful little flip in my chest, only to find a notification from a weather app or a spam email. The family thread remained dead. My individual text to my father sat marked as read, blue bubbles floating in a white void, unanswered. I told myself it was just a temper tantrum. They were angry, they were embarrassed, and they were punishing me. I told myself it would blow over by the weekend because the weekend was Lily's birthday. My niece, Tessa's daughter, was turning 6. I had bought her a Lego set she had been eyeing for months, a massive castle with moving drawbridges. I had wrapped it in purple paper on Wednesday, assuming the invitation would come in a separate text, or perhaps I was just expected to know the time and place because I had been to every birthday party since the day she was born. Friday came and went, no text. Saturday morning arrived. I woke up early, the anxiety sitting in my stomach like cold oatmeal. I waited until 10 o'clock, then 11. Finally, I opened Instagram. The first thing I saw was a photo posted by my mother. It was taken at Maplewood Lanes, the bowling alley on the south side of town. The picture showed the whole clan squeezed into a booth behind a lane. There was a pizza with a singular candle on it. My father was holding Lily on his lap. Evan was there, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, giving a thumbs up to the camera. Tessa was laughing, her head thrown back. My mother was smiling that beatific, matriarchal smile she wore whenever the family was assembled and looking perfect. I was the only one missing. I zoomed in on the photo until the pixels blurred. There was an empty space at the end of the booth where I usually sat. They hadn't just forgotten to invite me. They had gone ahead and celebrated, taken the picture, and posted it publicly, knowing I would see it. It was a digital billboard announcing my excision. My hands shook as I typed a text to Tessa. I have Lily's gift here. I didn't get the invite for the bowling alley. Can I drop it off later today? I watched the screen. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, pulsating rhythmically. Then they vanished. Then they appeared again. Finally, the message came through. We are taking space. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no, maybe next week. Just, we are taking space. It sounded clinical, like something she had read in a self-help book about toxic relationships. Only she was weaponizing it against the person who had spent the last decade fixing her resumes and lending her deposit money. I put the phone down and looked at the purple-wrapped gift on my coffee table. I felt a stinging heat behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. I grabbed my car keys. I am not going to let them do this. I said aloud to the empty apartment. I drove to my parents' house. It was a 20-minute drive to the suburbs, past the manicured lawns and the identical mailboxes. I knew this drive by heart. I knew where the speed trap usually sat on Elm Street. I knew which driveway had the aggressive golden retriever. When I pulled into their driveway, my father's truck was there. Evan's sedan was parked on the street. They were all inside. The Sunday ritual, pot roast and complaints about politics, a ritual I was currently banned from. I walked up the concrete path to the front door. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, wet thudding that made me feel nauseous. I rang the doorbell. I heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful footsteps. The inner door opened. My mother stood there. She was wearing her apron, the blue one with the sunflowers. Behind her, I could hear the low hum of the television and the clink of silverware. She did not open the storm door. She stood behind the glass and the screen, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked at me, not with anger, but with a profound, disappointed weariness, as if I were a solicitor trying to sell her something she had already politely refused. "Mom," I said, raising my voice slightly to be heard through the glass. "We need to talk about this. Excluding me from Lily's birthday is ridiculous." She didn't unlock the screen. She just stared at me. "Ruby," she said. Her voice was muffled by the mesh. "We are not discussing this." "Discussing what?" I asked. The fact that I wouldn't sign a predatory loan? Mom, look at the numbers. I can show you the math. Evan was getting ripped off. It is not about the numbers, she said, cutting me off. It is about loyalty. You hurt your brother. You made him feel small. And until you are ready to apologize and make that right, we are not going to pretend everything is fine. I stared at her. The distortion of the screen made her face look pixelated, like a low-resolution image of the mother I thought I knew. I am not apologizing for protecting my financial future, I said, my voice trembling. And I am not apologizing for trying to stop Evan from making a mistake. Then you have nothing to say that we want to hear, she said. She started to close the inner door. Mom, I shouted, instinctively reaching for the handle of the storm door. It was locked. Mom, please, this is insane. Over a truck? She paused, just for a second, the heavy wood door resting against her hip. It is never just about a truck. Ruby, she said softly, it is about who you can count on when it matters. And we learned this week that we cannot count on you. She closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home with a final, metallic thunk. I stood on the porch for a long time. I could smell the pot roast cooking. It smelled like rosemary and onion soup mix, the smell of every Sunday of my childhood. I was standing 5 feet away from my family, separated by 2 inches of wood and a lifetime of conditions I was only just beginning to see. That night, the silence in my apartment felt different. It wasn't just quiet. It was haunting. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows, and the second guessing began. It started as a whisper and grew into a roar. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I could have signed it and just monitored the payments myself. I made good money now. If Evan defaulted, I could probably cover a few months while we sold the truck. Was $55,000 worth losing my parents? Was it worth losing my niece? I rolled over, burying my face in the pillow. The patterns of my childhood began to play out in my head like old home movies. I remembered being 7 years old, cleaning the entire kitchen while my mom had a migraine, desperate for her to come downstairs and say, "Good job, Ruby." And she had. She had hugged me and said, "You are my little helper. You are the only one who helps me." I remembered being 16, crying because a boy had broken up with me, and my father sighing loudly from his armchair. "Don't be dramatic, Ruby. Crying doesn't fix anything." The message had been coded into my DNA before I even knew what money was. You are loved when you are useful. You are loved when you solve problems. If you have needs, you are a burden. If you say no, you are a traitor. The silence wasn't a punishment for a specific crime. It was a withdrawal of the currency I had been working for my entire life. They were showing me exactly what I was worth to them if I wasn't providing a service. 0, Monday morning. I went to work. I needed the distraction. I needed to look at spreadsheets and answer emails and exist in a world where logic still applied. I worked at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Lake Haven. It was a good job, with sane colleagues and a coffee machine that ground fresh beans. I walked into the break room at 10 o'clock to refill my mug. 2 women from the accounts department, Sarah and Jen, were standing by the refrigerator. They stopped talking abruptly when I walked in. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile. "Hey, Ruby," Sarah said. She didn't smile back. She looked at me with a strange expression, part curiosity, part judgment. There was a pause, thick and awkward. "We were just talking about the Hearts for Hope Gala," Jen said, breaking the silence. "Are you going this year?" My stomach dropped. Hearts for Hope was a local charity that raised money for after-school programs. My mother was on the volunteer board. She had been the treasurer for 5 years. I usually go." I said, "I haven't bought a ticket yet." "Oh," Sarah said. She stirred her coffee, looking at the swirling liquid. "That is interesting. I saw your mom at the planning meeting on Saturday. She mentioned she was under a lot of stress." "Oh?" I said, gripping my mug. "Yeah," Sarah said, glancing up at me. She didn't go into details. Obviously, she is such a professional, but she implied that there was some family stuff going on. Something about how hard it is when children become difficult to deal with as adults. The room seemed to tilt, difficult to deal with. I stared at Sarah. I wondered what exactly my mother had said. Had she sighed and looked tearful? Had she shaken her head and mentioned how she tried so hard, but some people just couldn't be helped? I am sure she is just stressed about the event planning. I said, my voice sounding thin. Right, Sarah said. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. The narrative had already been planted. Ruby is difficult. Ruby is the cause of Sharon's stress. I walked back to my desk, my skin prickling with heat. This was the escalation I hadn't expected. The silence was for the family, but the noise was for the community. My mother was a master of the vague prayer request style of gossip, sharing just enough pain to garner sympathy and paint herself as the martyr. While letting the listener fill in the blanks about who was holding the dagger, I couldn't focus. I sat at my desk, staring at a quarterly report, but all I could see was Evan's face at the dealership. I needed to fix this. The old urge to repair, to smooth over, to bridge the gap surged up. I grabbed my phone and walked out to the stairwell, the only place in the building with privacy. I dialed Evan's number. He answered on the second ring. What? He said. No, hello. Just a sharp, defensive bark. Evan, please don't hang up. I said, I am at work, but I want to help you. Help me how? By judging me some more? No. I said, listen, I have been looking at some things. I can help you with credit counseling. I know a nonprofit downtown that works with people to boost their scores fast, and I can help you budget. If we look at your income versus your expenses, maybe we can save up a down payment in 6 months, a real down payment. Then you won't need a cosigner. There was a silence on the line. For a second, I thought he was listening. I thought maybe the brother I used to build forts with was still in there. Then he spoke, and his voice was different. It wasn't the frantic, whining tone of the dealership. It was colder. It sounded rehearsed. You humiliated me, Ruby, he said. I didn't. You walked out on me in front of a professional contact. He recited, you treated me like a child. You cost me an opportunity to advance my career because you were on a power trip. Evan, that loan was, I don't want your budgeting help, he said, talking over me. I don't want your charity. I wanted my sister to have my back. Mom was right. You think you are better than us. Evan, please, don't call me again until you are ready to sign, he said. He hung up. I stood in the concrete stairwell, listening to the drone of the disconnect tone. The words echoed in my head. Cost me an opportunity. Power trip. These weren't Evan's phrases. Evan didn't talk about professional contacts. He talked about guys he knew. He was reading from a script my father had likely written for him over Sunday pot roast. That evening, I met Marisol at a wine bar on the riverfront. Marisol had been my best friend since college. She was a paralegal with a sharp tongue and a low tolerance for nonsense. I poured the entire story out to her. The dealership, the numbers, the birthday snub, the door slam, the stairwell call. When I finished, Marisol didn't offer sympathy in the way I expected. She didn't say, "Oh, you poor thing." She set her glass down hard on the table. "Ruby," she said, "this isn't about the truck, I know." I said, wiping my eyes. "They think I am selfish." "No," Marisol said, leaning forward. "You are missing the point. It is not about the truck, and it is not about you being selfish. It is about control." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," she said. "If this was just about a truck, Evan would be mad. Sure, but your parents? Locking you out? Excluding you from a 6-year-old's birthday? Smearing you at a charity board meeting? That is a coordinated campaign, Ruby." "That is tactical. But why?" I asked. "Why would they do that?" "Because you said no." Marisol said. She looked at me with intense seriousness. "You are the resource. Ruby, you are the bank. You are the fixer. The moment the toaster stops making toast, You don't just get mad at the toaster. You kick it. You shake it. You try to force it to work again. They are trying to break you. They are raising the emotional cost of your no until it becomes cheaper for you to just say yes. I felt a chill go down my spine. It fits. I whispered. Marisol reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You cannot cave. If you sign that loan now, you are teaching them that the silent treatment works. You are teaching them that if they hurt you enough, you will pay them to stop. I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. I didn't want to believe my family was a syndicate. I wanted to believe they were just hurt people. But Marisol's words had the heavy ring of truth. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and sat in the dark living room. I typed Pine Ridge Motors Lake Haven into the search bar. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I needed to validate the math. The reviews popped up. 3.2 stars. I started filtering by the 1-star reviews. Stay away. They packed my loan with $3,000 of garbage I didn't ask for. Salesman Rick is a crook. He told me I needed a cosigner or I couldn't buy the car, then ran my credit 6 times. They pressure you to bring family members in. They tried to get my grandmother to cosign for a sports car. Predatory. I read one from 3 months ago. Watch out for the sign here rush. They try to rush your signature before you see the final APR. I almost signed a 14% loan when I qualified for 6. I sat back. I was right. The deal was toxic. The dealership was a shark tank. But that realization didn't bring me peace. It brought me terror. My brother was willing to walk into a shark tank, and my parents were willing to push him in, just to maintain the appearance of success. They didn't care about the financial reality. They only cared that I had refused to play my part in the delusion. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. I felt a sudden, frantic need to protect myself. If they were this desperate, if Evan was this desperate, what else would they do? I opened a new tab. I went to the Equifax website. Freeze my credit. I went through the steps. Name, social security number, address. I created a PIN. I felt a grim satisfaction as the lock icon appeared on the screen. I did the same for TransUnion and Experian. Then I went to my email. I changed the password. I changed my banking passwords. I turned on 2-factor authentication for everything. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Truck Loan Timeline. I opened a Word document and started typing. Tuesday, October 14th. Evan asks for loan. Claims $55,000 price. Wednesday, October 15th. Visit to Pine Ridge Motors. Actual loan amount $68,000. Dealer add-ons present. Refusal to sign. Thursday, October 16th. Removed from group chat. Saturday, October 18th. Excluded from Lily's birthday. Sunday, October 19th. Mom refuses to speak at door. I typed it all out. It looked cold and forensic on the white screen. It looked like a police report. I also opened a physical notebook I kept in my desk drawer. I dated the page. Physical symptoms. Insomnia, 3 nights. Loss of appetite. Skipped lunch and dinner today. Chest tightness. Hypervigilance. Jumped when phone rang. I felt ridiculous writing it down. I wasn't in a war zone. I was in a fight with my family. But Marisol's voice was in my head. It is a campaign. If this escalated, if my work reputation was damaged, if I ended up in therapy, I wanted a record. I wanted to remember that I wasn't the one who went crazy. The week dragged on. The silence from the family held firm. I saw my father at a gas station on Thursday. He saw me, looked right through me, and turned his back to pump his gas. It was a localized shunning. Brutal and complete. Friday arrived. I came home from work, exhausted, carrying a bag of takeout I didn't want to eat. I grabbed the mail from my box in the lobby. Utility bill, flyer for a pizza place, insurance statement, and a white envelope. It looked official. It had a window on the front. Pre-approved offer was stamped in red on the outside. I usually threw these away. Junk mail, credit card offers. But something caught my eye. The name on the address label was correct. Ruby Powell. But the address was wrong. It wasn't my apartment address. It was my parents' address. I froze, standing in the hallway of my building. If the credit card company had my current address, which they did, because I had bills sent here, why was this offer sent to my parents' house? And why did it have a forwarding sticker on it from the post office? I tore the envelope open. It was a letter from a subprime credit card issuer, the kind that offers a $300 limit with a $75 annual fee, the kind of card you get when you are desperate to rebuild credit. Dear Ruby, congratulations. Your application for the Fresh Start credit line has been pre-approved based on your recent inquiry. Recent inquiry? I hadn't made an inquiry. I had an 800 credit score. I didn't apply for subprime credit cards with $300 limits. My blood ran cold. Someone had applied for this card. Someone had used my name and my social security number. But they had used my parents' address. Perhaps because they didn't know I had updated my address with the credit bureaus. Or perhaps because they wanted the card to go there, where they could intercept it. The system had flagged it. The forwarding order I had on file from years ago must have kicked in, sending the mail to me instead of leaving it in my parents' mailbox. I looked at the date on the letter. October 15th. The same day as the dealership visit, the world seemed to narrow down to the paper in my hand. This wasn't just silence anymore. This wasn't just emotional manipulation. Someone in that house, Evan, or maybe even my parents, had tried to open a credit line in my name. It was a small amount, a test run, a fishing expedition to see if the identity worked. I leaned against the wall, the paper trembling in my hand. I thought I was holding a boundary against a truck loan. I was wrong. I was holding a crime scene. The customer service representative on the other end of the line had a voice that sounded flattened by 1,000 identical conversations. Her name was Brenda, according to her opening script, and she worked for the fraud department of the credit card issuer that had sent the letter. I sat at my kitchen table, the white envelope smoothed out in front of me like a map of a battlefield. It was 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. So, just to verify, Brenda said, the sound of keyboard keys clacking in the background. You did not submit an application on October 15th for the Fresh Start Platinum card? No. I said, I did not. And you do not currently reside at the address listed on the application, 429 Elm Street? I haven't lived there in 8 years. I said, that is my parents' house. There was a pause. The typing stopped. Okay, Ms. Powell, here's what I'm seeing. The application was submitted online. The applicant had your social security number, your date of birth, and your full legal name. However, the system flagged it because the address didn't match the one we have on file from your credit report updates. That is why the letter was generated. It was a request for address verification. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. If the address had matched, I asked, keeping my voice steady, would it have been approved? Likely. Yes, Brenda said. It was a pre-approval offer. The verification step is usually the last hurdle. I closed my eyes. Someone had sat at a computer, probably the desktop in my parents' den, the one with the sticky spacebar, and typed my social security number into a form. They had tried to open a credit line in my name, knowing the card would be mailed to their house. They would have activated it, maxed it out, and I wouldn't have known until the collections calls started coming to my cell phone. Who does that? Who steals the identity of their daughter or their sister? I need you to mark this as fraud. I said, we will cancel the application. Brenda said, but Ms. Powell, since the applicant had your full social security number, you might want to file a police report. This isn't just a random phishing attempt. This looks like someone who knows you. I know, I whispered. I hung up the phone. The silence of the apartment rushed back in, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt dangerous. I needed to call my parents. I didn't want to. I wanted to crawl under my duvet and pretend I was an orphan. But I needed to know. I needed to hear their voices when I told them what I knew. I dialed my father's number. He answered on the 4th ring. Hello? His voice was gruff, guarded. He knew we were in a standoff. He was expecting an apology, or perhaps a plea to be let back into the fold. Dad, I said, I am not calling to argue about the truck. There was a silence. Then he sighed. Then what do you want? Ruby? We are busy. I received a letter today from a credit card company. I said, I was careful to keep my tone flat. Factual. Someone applied for a credit card in my name on Tuesday. They used your address. The silence on the other end stretched out. It lasted 2 seconds, then 3. In that silence, I heard everything. I heard the lack of surprise. I heard the calculation. If I had told him that someone had thrown a brick through his window, he would have been outraged. He would have asked details. He would have threatened to call the sheriff. But he said nothing. Dad, I said, it is probably just junk mail. Ruby, he said finally. His tone was dismissive, irritated. You know how these companies are. They send things to everyone. It wasn't a marketing flyer. Dad, it was a verification for an application that had already been submitted with my social security number. I just got off the phone with their fraud department. I heard him exhale, a sharp burst of air against the microphone. Why do you always have to be so dramatic? He snapped. Fraud department? Really? You are going to call the fraud department over a piece of mail? Someone tried to use my identity. I said, that is a felony. Oh, stop it, he said. Stop using words like felony. You are making mountains out of molehills. Maybe your mother clicked on something by accident. She is not good with the computer, or maybe Evan was just checking rates and the system got confused because you two have the same last name. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers ached. The gaslighting was breathtaking. He was suggesting that Evan, a 31-year-old man, had accidentally typed my social security number instead of his own while checking rates. I'm just telling you facts. I said, the application was flagged. I have canceled it, and I have frozen my credit. So if anyone tries to click on something by accident again, it won't work. You are acting like we are criminals, he said, his voice rising. After everything we have done for you, you are treating your own family like enemies. Why are you making this into something legal? Because it is legal. Dad, I said, identity theft is a legal issue. I don't have time for this. He said, you are hysterical. Call us when you are ready to act like a daughter. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He hadn't denied it. Not once. He hadn't asked who did it. He had just attacked me for noticing. My hands were shaking. I wasn't dealing with a family spat. I was dealing with a financial ambush. Monday morning. I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on marketing strategies when my own financial life was under siege. I had an appointment at 10 o'clock with the Holloway and Pierce Legal Clinic. It was a small firm located in a strip mall near the courthouse, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a dry cleaner. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. The carpet was worn in a path from the door to the receptionist's desk. This was not a place for corporate mergers. This was a place for people whose lives were leaking oil. I met with an attorney named Sarah Pierce. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they had seen every possible variation of human greed. I sat in her office, which was piled high with manila folders, and I told her everything. I showed her the letter. I showed her my timeline. I told her about the truck, the pressure, the silence, and the phone call with my father. She listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen. When I finished, she capped the pen and looked at me. First, she said, her voice raspy and direct, you did the right thing freezing your credit. That is step 1, 2, and 3. Is it? I hesitated. Is it common for families to do this? Ms. Pierce sighed. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Ms. Powell, about 40% of the identity theft cases I see involve a family member. It is usually a parent or a sibling. They justify it to themselves. They say, I will pay it back before she notices. Or they say, we are a family. Her money is our money. They don't see it as theft. They see it as resource reallocation. I felt a wave of nausea. Resource reallocation. That was exactly how my mother spoke. We lift each other up. What do I do? I asked. I don't want to put my brother in jail. Ms. Pierce nodded. Most people don't. And I'm not suggesting you file a police report today, unless you want to burn that bridge to the ground immediately. But you need to understand something. Co-signing liability is absolute. If you had signed that truck loan, you would be 100% liable for the debt. But you would have zero rights to the vehicle. You couldn't sell it. You couldn't take the keys. You would just be the wallet. She leaned forward. And this letter? The credit card application? That is a warning shot. It means they are looking for liquidity. If they can't get it from a bank, and they can't get it from you voluntarily, they tried to get it from you involuntarily. You need to document everything. Every text. Every call. Save them. Back them up. If they try this again, if they manage to open an account and default, you will need that paper trail to prove to a judge that you were not a willing participant. She handed me a pamphlet titled, Protecting Your Identity from Friendly Fraud. Do not sign anything, she said firmly, not a cosign form, not a character reference, not a birthday card unless you read the fine print, and check your credit report, not just the score, the report. Look for soft inquiries. I walked out of her office into the bright, flat sunlight of the parking lot. I felt heavier, but also sharper. I wasn't crazy. I was a target. That night, I took Ms. Pierce's advice. I sat down at my computer and pulled my full annual credit reports from all 3 bureaus. It was a dense wall of data. Address history, old student loans, my current car payment. I scanned the section labeled inquiries. There were the hard inquiries I knew about. The check when I moved apartments 2 years ago, the check when I bought my phone. Then I looked at the soft inquiries section. These were checks that didn't affect my score, usually done by companies looking to send promotional offers, but one stood out. Date, October 14th. Inquirer, Auto Finders Finance, LLC, October 14th. The day Evan called me about the truck, the day before we went to the dealership. Evan must have given my information to a financing company over the phone before he even asked me. He had been shopping my credit around, seeing what rates he could get with me as a cosigner, before I had even agreed to go to the lot. He had treated my consent as a foregone conclusion. I closed the laptop. The betrayal felt physical, like a bruise blooming under my skin. I needed to know what was happening with the truck. I unblocked Evan on Facebook. I didn't friend him, but his profile was public. There it was. A photo posted 2 days ago. Evan was standing next to the charcoal gray truck from the dealership. He was leaning against the grill, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses. The caption read, New wheels, time to level up, big things coming, hustle boss moves earned it. He had bought it. I frowned. How? I had refused to sign. I scrolled through the comments. Nice ride, man. Beast mode. Then I saw a comment from a guy I recognized as one of Evan's old high school friends. Whoa, big payment. Hope you got that construction gig locked down. Evan's reply. Money flows where energy goes. Bro, don't worry about my pockets. I looked closer at the photo. The license plate frame didn't say Pine Ridge Motors. It said Last Chance Auto Finance. I Googled Last Chance Auto Finance. The search results were grim. It was a subprime lender specializing in high-risk borrowers. Their website boasted, no credit, bad credit, no problem. I knew what that meant. It meant an interest rate of 20% or higher. It meant weekly payments. It meant a GPS tracker installed in the chassis so they could repossess it the second a payment was missed. Evan hadn't found a cosigner. He had gone to a loan shark in a strip mall suit. He was drowning, and he was posting photos pretending he was swimming. On Wednesday, the silence broke. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We are having a family dinner on Sunday at 5. Your father and I have discussed it, and we are willing to forgive you for the way you acted at the dealership. We want to move past this. Please come. It is time to make things right. I stared at the screen. Willing to forgive you. The audacity took my breath away. They had tried to steal my identity. They had slandered me to my coworkers. They had frozen me out. And now they were offering me forgiveness? My first instinct was to throw the phone across the room. My second instinct was to reply with a screenshot of the credit card fraud letter, but I paused. Ms. Pierce had said to document everything, and she had said I needed to know what they were planning if I didn't go. The narrative would be that I was the stubborn one, the one who refused the olive branch. If I went, I could see exactly what game they were playing. I typed back, "I will be there." I didn't say thank you. I didn't say sorry. Sunday afternoon. The sky was a sheet of gray steel. I drove to my parents' house, the knot in my stomach tight and hard. I wasn't going as a daughter today. I was going as a witness. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. I wanted a clear exit path. When I walked in, the house smelled of garlic bread and lasagna. It was the smell of comfort, weaponized. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already clean. "Ruby," she said. She didn't hug me. She gestured vaguely to the living room. "Go say hello to your father." Glenn was sitting in his recliner, watching football. He muted the TV when I walked in, but he didn't stand up. "Hello, Dad," I said. "Ruby?" He nodded. "Glad you decided to be reasonable." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Reasonable. Evan was sitting on the sofa. He looked tired. The swagger from the Facebook photo was missing. He was picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "Hey," he mumbled. "Hey, Evan, I hear you got the truck." "Yeah," he said, glancing at Dad. "Got it handled." Dinner was an exercise in tension. The only sounds were the scraping of forks against china and the clock ticking on the wall. My mother talked about the weather. She talked about the neighbor's new fence. She talked about everything except the $55,000 elephant in the room. Finally, when the plates were cleared, my father cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "it is good to have everyone together." He looked at me. "Ruby, we know you have your reservations about finances. We know you are very particular." I said nothing. I just held his gaze. "But," he continued, "family is about helping each other. Evan has taken a big step with this truck. It is going to open doors, but the financing he had to get, it is temporary, just until the job money starts rolling in. Here it comes." I thought, "Evan." My father said, "Show her." Evan reached under the table and pulled out a blue folder. He slid it across the tablecloth toward me. It wasn't a bank form. It was a document typed up in Microsoft Word. The title at the top read, "Personal Loan Agreement." I opened it. I, Ruby Powell, agree to lend Evan Powell the sum of $2,000 per month for a period of 12 months, to be used for vehicle expenses. Evan Powell agrees to repay this amount in full once his credit is refinanced. I read it twice. $2,000 a month, $24,000 total. They weren't asking me to co-sign anymore. They knew I wouldn't do it, so they had pivoted. They wanted me to pay the loan directly. They wanted me to be the subprime lender, but without the contract, without the interest, and without the ability to repossess the truck. I looked up. All three of them were watching me. My mother looked hopeful. My father looked expectant. Evan looked at the table. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a solution," my father said. "Since you wouldn't sign with the bank, this keeps the bank out of it. You lend Evan the money to make the payments so he can get out of that high-interest loan he is in. Then, in a year, when his credit is better, he refinances and pays you back in a lump sum. And where do you think I have an extra $2,000 a month?" I asked calmly. "You have a good job," my mother said quickly. "You have savings. We know you do. You have always been good with money. So because I am good with money, I should pay for Evan's bad decision? It is not a gift." Evan snapped, his head jerking up. "It is a loan. It says right there." I looked at the paper. It was meaningless. It had no collateral. It had no payment schedule. It had no interest. It was a promise from a man who had lied about the price of the truck, lied about the dealership terms, and whose credit was so bad he had to go to a predatory lender. If I signed this, I would never see that money again. They would bleed me dry. $2,000 at a month, and when I asked for repayment, they would call me selfish again. I closed the folder. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. My father's face turned a dark, blotchy red. "Excuse me?" he said. "I am not signing this." I said, "I am not lending Evan money. I am not paying for this truck." "Ruby," my mother said, her voice trembling, "we are trying to compromise here. We are trying to find a way to make this work so your brother doesn't lose everything. He shouldn't have bought a truck he couldn't afford." I said, "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I remembered Ms. Pierce's office. I remembered the fraud letter." I continued, my voice steady. "I will not be pressured into financing this family. I will not sign bank loans. I will not sign personal loans. And I will not discuss my finances with you again. You ungrateful little—" My father started, gripping the edge of the table. I stood up. "I am leaving now," I said. I picked up my purse. I didn't look at Evan. I couldn't bear to see the mixture of relief and hatred in his eyes. Relief that he could blame his failure on me, and hatred that I wasn't saving him. I walked to the front door. The silence behind me was different this time. It wasn't the silence of punishment. It was the silence of shock. They had thrown their best trap, and I had walked right through it. I opened the front door. The cold evening air hit my face. Sharon's voice rang out from the dining room. It was loud, shrill, and stripped of all its usual warmth. "Don't come crying when we are gone," she screamed, "when you are all alone in that apartment with your money. Don't you dare come crying to us." I paused on the porch. I realized then that the silence of the last week had never been about emptiness. It had been a weapon. It had been leverage. They thought that if they withdrew their love, I would pay any price to get it back. They thought my fear of being alone was greater than my self-respect. They were wrong. I walked down the concrete path to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I checked my rearview mirror. The house was a glowing yellow box in the darkness, a stage where a tragedy was playing out. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't on the stage. I was in the audience, and I was driving away. Monday morning arrived with a hangover sensation. Though I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol, it was the emotional hangover of the Sunday dinner. The adrenaline crash after walking out of my parents' house while my mother screamed at my back. I sat at my desk at the marketing firm, staring at my dual monitors, trying to care about click-through rates for a local dental chain. At 10:30, my personal email pinged. The subject line was simple. The truth. The sender was Glenn Powell. My hand hovered over the mouse. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew it was poison, but the need to know the shape of the weapon being used against me was too strong. I clicked. It was not a short email. It was a manifesto. "Ruby," it began. "No dear, no greeting. Your mother and I sat up all night crying. We cannot understand how we raised a daughter so cold, so transactional, and so ungrateful. You talk about money like it is God. You talk about interest rates and credit scores like they are more important than your own flesh and blood. Since you want to talk about who owes what, maybe we should look at the ledger." I scrolled down. My breath hitched in my throat. He had made a list, a literal, itemized list of my childhood. Item 1. Orthodontia. Age 12, $4,000. You had crooked teeth. Ruby. We fixed them so you could have a nice smile. Did we ask for a contract? Item 2. Dance lessons. Ages 6 to 14. Estimated $8,000. You weren't even that good. But we paid for every recital costume because we wanted you to be happy. Item 3. The time your car broke down in college and I drove 3 hours to fix the alternator. Parts and labor value, $500, plus gas. Plus my time. Item 4. Allowing you to live with us for 6 months after graduation rent-free. Market value of rent, $6,000. The list went on. It included school trips. It included Christmas presents. It included emotional support during your breakup with Mark. The email concluded, "We invested everything in you. We sacrificed our own retirement savings to make sure you and Evan had a start. And now, when the family needs a small return on that investment, not even money, Just a signature. Just a temporary loan. You act like a stranger. You are legally an adult, but morally, you are bankrupt. Do not contact us until you are ready to pay your debt to this family." I sat frozen in my ergonomic office chair. The hum of the air conditioning sounded loud and aggressive. He had turned my childhood into an invoice. Every hug, every meal, every moment of parental duty had been logged, valued, and was now being presented for payment. It wasn't love. It was a long-con investment scheme. They hadn't raised a daughter. They had raised an insurance policy, and they were furious that the policy wasn't paying out on demand. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Hot and humiliating, I quickly wiped it away before anyone could see. I printed the email. I didn't reply. I just added it to the folder labeled Truck Loan Timeline. The isolation deepened as the week wore on, but it changed flavor. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was noise. I found out about Tessa's campaign on Wednesday. I received a message from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. Linda lived in Florida and usually only communicated via Facebook comments on holiday photos. "Ruby," the message read, "I am so sorry to hear you are struggling. Tessa told me about the mental breakdown. Please know we are praying for you. Money stress can make people do crazy things, but don't shut out the people who love you. Let your parents help you get therapy." I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. Mental breakdown. That was the narrative. They weren't telling people I refused to co-sign. That would make them look financially irresponsible. Instead, they were telling people I was mentally unwell. They were painting me as unstable, paranoid, and obsessed with money to the point of delusion. It was brilliant, in a sick, Machiavellian way. If I tried to tell my side of the story now, if I tried to show the predatory loan papers or the identity theft letter, everyone would view it through the lens Tessa had crafted. Poor Ruby. She is having an episode. She is paranoid. It was a preemptive strike to destroy my credibility. I typed a reply to Aunt Linda. "Linda, I am perfectly healthy. I refuse to co-sign a high-interest loan for Evan, and unfortunately, the family is upset about my boundary. There is no breakdown. I am at work right now." I hit send. Aunt Linda replied with a thumbs-up emoji. She didn't believe me. The seed had already been planted. The poison seeped into my workplace on Thursday. My marketing firm represented a lot of local businesses in Lake Haven, which meant the social circles were small and overlapping. My mother's volunteer work with Hearts for Hope was high profile. She rubbed elbows with the wives of bank presidents and car dealership owners. I was in the break room, stirring sugar into my coffee, when the office manager, a woman named Patricia who loved local gossip more than oxygen, walked in. "Ruby," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern, "I ran into your mom at the bakery this morning. She was picking up pastries for the gala committee." "Oh?" I said, keeping my back to her as I stirred. "She looks exhausted." Patricia said, "She mentioned that she is practically raising 2 families right now because of, well, she didn't say exactly, but she implied that you have really stepped back from everything." I turned around. Patricia was watching me closely, looking for a crack. She said something about how hard it is when a team member stops being a team player. Patricia continued. She wasn't talking about work, obviously, but it made me wonder, is everything okay? "Ruby, you have seemed a little rigid lately." Rigid, that was the word. Not responsible, not prudent, rigid. My mother was using her social capital to subtly damage my professional reputation. She wasn't saying Ruby is bad at her job. She was saying Ruby is difficult. Ruby is not a team player. In a mid-sized city like Lake Haven, that kind of whisper campaign could kill a career. I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber over a skull. My mother is very passionate about her causes. "Patricia," I said, "we have a disagreement about a financial matter. It has nothing to do with my work or my ability to be a team player here." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Well, I hope you guys work it out. Stress is a killer." She walked out, leaving the scent of her perfume and her judgment in the air. I went back to my desk, my hands trembling. I felt cornered. If I defended myself loudly, I looked like the dramatic, unstable daughter they were describing. If I stayed silent, the lies became the truth. I needed to secure the perimeter. I opened a blank document. I needed to communicate with the extended family, my cousins, my aunts, the people who were currently receiving Tessa's updates about my breakdown. I couldn't argue with them, but I could state my position. I wrote a message. I kept it short. I stripped every ounce of emotion out of it. Dear family, I am writing this because there seems to be some confusion regarding my distance lately. I want to be clear. I love my parents and my brother. However, I recently refused to co-sign a large vehicle loan for Evan because I did not believe the financial terms were safe for him or for me. Since that refusal, I have been pressured to change my mind. To protect my own financial health and peace, I am taking a step back from conversations that involve money or guilt. I am not unwell. I am simply holding a boundary. I hope to reconnect when things are calmer. I sent it via group text to 12 people, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. It was a risk. It might make things worse, but it felt like planting a flag in the ground. Here I stand. I am sane. I am sober. I am saying no. The blowback was immediate silence. No one replied to the group text. I imagined the side texts flying between them. Did you see what Ruby sent? She sounds so cold. But I didn't care. I had put it on the record. 2 weeks passed. The calendar turned to November. The weather in Ohio turned bitter. The sky a relentless slate gray. I hadn't spoken to Evan since the dinner. I hadn't checked his social media. I was trying to detox. Then, on a Tuesday night at 1 a.m, my phone rang. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding. Late-night calls are never good news. I looked at the screen. Evan. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the sister in me, the one who had put Band-Aids on his scraped knees, couldn't do it. I answered, "Hello? Ruby?" His voice was slurry, thick. He wasn't drunk. I realized after a second, he was crying. He was hyperventilating. "Evan? What is wrong? Are you hurt? I can't do it. Ruby, I can't do it." "Can't do what?" "The payment," he choked out. "The first payment was due today. I didn't have it." I sat up in bed, pulling the duvet around my shoulders. The cold reality of the math was finally hitting him. "How much was it?" I asked softly. $1,100, he whispered. $1,100. That was more than my rent. "Evan," I said, "that is insane. What about the construction job?" "I didn't get the full hours yet," he said. "They said I am on probation for 90 days. I am only making 18 an hour right now." I thought, the guy at the dealership, Rick, he said I could refinance after 3 payments. He promised. "Ruby," he said, "just make 3 payments and we will drop the rate." I closed my eyes. It was the oldest lie in the subprime handbook. Date the rate, marry the car. But you can't refinance a car that is worth $40,000 when you owe $68,000 on it. No bank would touch that loan. He was underwater the second he drove off the lot. "He lied to you, Evan," I said. "You can't refinance negative equity." "So what do I do?" he wailed. His voice cracked like a child's. "They are going to take it. If I miss the first payment, they trigger the default clause." I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the reality check. "You have 3 options," I said, my voice clear in the dark room. 1. You sell the truck immediately. You will still owe the difference, probably $10,000 or $15,000, but it is better than owing 68. You take out a small personal loan to cover the gap, and you get a cheap sedan. "I can't sell it," he shouted, his mood swinging instantly from despair to anger. "I just posted it on Instagram. Everyone knows I have it. I can't show up to the job site in a Corolla. Ruby, I will look like a loser." Option 2. I continued, ignoring his outburst. "You voluntarily surrender it. You call the lender. You tell them to come get it. It trashes your credit for 7 years. It is a repossession on your record, and they will still sue you for the balance. But the bleeding stops. No repossession. That ruins me." Option 3. I said, You keep the truck. You get a second job. You work nights. You wait tables. You drive Uber. Not in the truck, because the gas will kill you. But in Mom's car if she lets you. You work 80 hours a week until you pay down the equity enough to sell it. Silence on the line. I could hear his ragged breathing. You are enjoying this, aren't you? He said. His voice was low, venomous. What? You love this. You love hearing me beg. You have the money. Ruby, you could fix this right now. You could write a check for the first 3 months, just to get me to the refinance, but you won't, because you want me to fail. You want to be the only successful one in the family. Evan, I said, I don't want you to fail. I tried to stop you from buying it. You are a bitch, he spat. Mom was right. You are a cold, jealous bitch. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. The compassion I had felt at the beginning of the call evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He didn't want a solution. He wanted a savior. And because I wouldn't climb up on the cross, I was the villain. The next morning, the soft contacting began. Sharon Powell was not a woman who engaged in direct conflict if she could avoid it. She preferred the war of attrition. My phone buzzed at 10 o'clock. Are you alive? Just 3 words. No context. I didn't reply. At noon. Just checking to make sure you are okay. We haven't heard from you. It was a trap, if I replied. I'm fine. She would pivot immediately to guilt. If you're fine, why are you hurting us? Why aren't you helping your brother? At 4 o'clock. I hope you are happy. Ruby, truly, I hope your independence keeps you warm at night. The aggression was thinly veiled. Peeking out from behind the motherly concern, I screenshotted every text. I added them to the folder. I didn't type a single word back. The silence I was holding was no longer a reaction to their treatment of me. It was a fortress, but the siege was about to breach the walls. On Friday afternoon, my desk phone rang at work. Not my cell, my work line. I picked it up. Ruby Powell, marketing. Ms. Powell? A male voice. Harsh. Rapid fire. This is Mr. Henderson from ARS Recovery. I'm trying to locate an Evan Powell. My stomach dropped to the floor. Who is this? I asked. I am calling regarding a personal business matter for Evan Powell. Your number was listed as a primary contact and reference on his application. We have been trying to reach him for 5 days. I felt the blood rush to my face. My cubicle walls suddenly felt very thin. I am not a party to Evan Powell's financial matters. I said, keeping my voice low so Patricia wouldn't hear. Ma'am, you are listed as a reference. We just need you to verify his employment and current residence. If you don't help us, we will have to escalate this to his employer directly. Do not call me again. I said, I did not give permission for my number to be used. Remove me from your list. I hung up. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't let go of the receiver. Evan hadn't just bought the truck. He had put my name and my work number down on the paperwork for the subprime lender. He had served me up as a shield. He knew they would call me if he ghosted them. He knew it would humiliate me. And he did it anyway. I realized then that this wasn't just a family dysfunction. This was a strategy. My parents and Evan had realized they couldn't force my signature. So they had shifted tactics. They were going to exhaust me. They were going to create so much chaos, so much social embarrassment, so much anxiety, that I would eventually write a check just to make it stop. They were banking on my breaking point. I grabbed my purse. I walked out of the office. I am taking an early lunch. I told Patricia as I passed her desk, I didn't go to lunch. I drove to the Holloway and Pierce Legal Clinic. I didn't have an appointment, but Ms. Pierce's receptionist saw my face, pale, tight, eyes wide with panic, and squeezed me in. I sat in the familiar chair with the worn upholstery. They called my work. I said, the collection agency. He put my work number down as a reference. Ms. Pierce nodded grimly. She didn't look surprised. It is time. Ruby, she said, you tried the soft boundary. You tried the family message. Now we need the hard boundary. She pulled a file from her drawer. We are going to send a cease and desist letter. She said, not a lawsuit. Not yet. but a formal legal notice sent via certified mail to your parents and your brother. What will it say? I asked. It will state that you are not liable for the debt. It will state that they have fraudulently used your personal information, your phone number, your address, without your consent. It will demand that they remove your information from all accounts immediately, and it will state that any further harassment, including contacting your employer or slandering your reputation to third parties, will result in immediate legal action for defamation and identity theft. I swallowed hard. Sending a legal letter to my parents, it felt like pressing a nuclear button. It was the end of something, the end of the hope that we could just hug it out one day. But then I remembered Glenn's email, the invoice. I remembered the credit card application. I remembered the collection agent's voice on my work line. Do it, I said. Ms. Pierce began to type. I sat there, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light from the window. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was the feeling of a soldier who finally realizes that the enemy isn't going to stop shooting just because you wave a white flag. I drove home that evening with a copy of the draft letter in my bag. I stopped at the grocery store. I bought vegetables. I bought chicken. I bought a bottle of expensive wine. I went home. I cooked dinner. I ate at my table, alone, with the lights dimmed. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tessa. Mom is crying again. Are you proud of yourself? You are destroying this family. I looked at the phone. I looked at the wine. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I just took a screenshot, printed it out, and added it to the folder. The folder was getting thick. I took a sip of wine. I am not destroying the family. I said to the empty room, I am surviving it. The cease and desist letter sat on my passenger seat, sealed in a rigid cardboard envelope, ready to be mailed. I had driven around with it for 2 days, hesitating. It felt like holding a grenade with the pin pulled. Once I dropped it in the blue metal box outside the post office, I knew there was no going back to Sunday pot roasts or Christmas mornings. It was a legal declaration of war, but before I could mail it, the war came to me. It was Thursday morning. The sky was a low, oppressive ceiling of white clouds. I was in my kitchen making toast when my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to her since she screamed at me from the porch. I answered, bracing myself for anger. Mom? Ruby. Her voice cracked. It was a sound I had never heard before. A raw, terrifying sound of total collapse. They are going to take it. Take what? I asked. Though I knew... The truck, she sobbed. Evan got a notice. They are sending a recovery agent. Today, maybe tomorrow. He is at work. Ruby, if they show up at the job site and tow his truck in front of the foreman, he loses the job. He loses everything. I felt a pang of genuine fear, not for the truck, but for the sheer velocity of the disaster. It had been less than a month. He missed the first payment. I said, that is what happens. We tried to pay it. She cried, your father and I, we tried to move some money around, but the transfer didn't clear in time. And the lender said because it is a high-risk loan, there is no grace period. They are ruthless people. Ruby. I listened to her weep. It was gut-wrenching. My mother, the woman who organized charity galas and kept a pristine house, was unraveling over a repossession order. For a moment, the daughter in me wanted to fix it. I wanted to say, I will wire the money. Stop crying. But then, the pivot came. Ruby, she said, sniffing loudly, you can stop this. I spoke to Rick at the dealership. He said if you come in today, right now, and sign the cosign paperwork, they can retroactively convert the loan. They can pay off the predatory lender and put it through the bank. The tow order gets canceled. The interest rate drops. Evan keeps his job. I stood in my kitchen, the smell of burnt toast filling the air. Just sign, she pleaded. Just sign, and we can fix this. We can go back to being a family. Please, Ruby, don't let your brother be humiliated. The compassion I had felt a second ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard realization. She wasn't calling to apologize. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because I was the only lever left to pull. She was weaponizing her own tears to force the signature I had already refused. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, "I am not signing. Ruby, I am not signing." I repeated, "If Evan is in trouble, he needs to surrender the truck voluntarily before they tow it. That is the only way to save his job." "You are heartless," she screamed, the sorrow instantly replaced by rage. "You want him to be fired." I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from guilt. They were trembling from adrenaline. I grabbed the cease and desist letter from the table and walked out the door. I drove to the post office and shoved it into the slot. It was done. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Evan. "Meet me. Please. Not at the house. Cedar Lane Diner. Noon. I just want to talk." I looked at the text. "I just want to talk." It was usually code for, "I just want to yell at you." But something about the brevity felt different. I drove to the Cedar Line Diner at noon. It was a neutral place, a chrome and neon relic on the edge of town where we used to get milkshakes after high school football games. I saw him in a booth near the back. I stopped in the aisle. The Evan I saw was not the swaggering construction manager who bragged about boss moves on Instagram. He looked 10 years older. His skin was gray and waxy. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, the hood pulled up, and his hands were wrapped around a mug of black coffee. They were shaking so badly the liquid was rippling. I slid into the booth opposite him. He didn't look up. He just stared at the coffee. "They are going to take it," he whispered. "I know." I said, "Mom called me." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah, she is in panic mode. She thinks she can bully you into saving us." I waited. "I surrender it tomorrow," he said. I called them. I told them where it is parked. "I'm going to tell my boss it had a mechanical failure and I had to trade it in." It was a lie, but a survival lie. I nodded. "That is the smart move. Evan, it stops the bleeding." He looked up at me then. His eyes were rimmed with red, bloodshot and exhausted. "It is not just the truck. Ruby." "What do you mean?" He looked around the diner to make sure no one was listening. He leaned in. "Mom and Dad are broke," he said. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Dad has his pension. Mom has the house. They are maxed out." Evan said, "Every card. The Visa. The MasterCard. The Discover. They have been floating it for years. You know how Dad always talks about investing in the family?" He took out a home equity line of credit 3 years ago to pay for Tessa's wedding. He told everyone he paid cash from savings. He didn't. He is paying interest on the cake right now. I sat back, the vinyl booth squeaking beneath me. "And the truck?" I asked. He ran a hand over his face. The truck was supposed to be the symbol. Dad pushed me to get the expensive one. He said, "Powell men drive serious trucks." He said if I looked successful, I would get the promotion, and then I could help them with the bills. We were banking on me making 6 figures by Christmas. I felt the room spin slightly. The truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a prop in a play called Everything is Fine. My parents were drowning in debt, hiding behind a facade of middle-class stability. And they had needed Evan to play the part of the successful son to keep the illusion alive. And when I refused to co-sign, I didn't just threaten Evan's credit, I threatened the family's entire house of cards. That is why they froze me out, I realized aloud. Evan nodded. "If you are not helping pay for the show, you can't be in the audience. They couldn't risk you asking questions. They couldn't risk you seeing the cracks. Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He looked down at his trembling hands. "Because I am tired. Ruby, I am so tired of lying. And because Dad is going to come for you next." "What?" "He says it is your fault," Evan said. "He is building a story. He says your refusal to sign the loan triggered a credit event that messed up his refinancing plan. It is nonsense, but he believes it. He says if you don't help, they will have to sell the house, and he is going to tell everyone it is because you abandoned us." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was a clean, sharp feeling. Let him try. I said, "I paid for Evan's coffee. I put a $20 bill on the table. Surrender the truck." "Evan," I said, "start over. You can sleep on my couch for a few days if you need to get away from them, but I'm not giving you money." He looked at the money, then at me. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded, a small, defeated motion. I left him there and walked out into the gray afternoon. When I got home, I went straight to my computer. I needed to see the ghost. I logged onto the county clerk's public records portal. I searched for Glenn Powell. I found the deed to the house. There was the primary mortgage, taken out 20 years ago, and there, just as Evan had said, was a home equity line of credit taken out 3 years ago for $50,000. But I kept searching. I searched for civil judgments. I found one. Lien holder, Apex Building Supplies. Debtor, Masterson Contractors, LLC, and Glenn Powell. Cosigner, amount, $12,000. Date, 2 years ago. I stared at the screen. Masterson Contractors. That was my Uncle Jerry's failed business. My father had co-signed for his brother's business supplies. The business had folded. Jerry had skipped town, and my father, the man who lectured me about loyalty and responsibility, had a $12,000 lien attached to his name that he had never mentioned. He wasn't a prudent financial patriarch. He was a compulsive co-signer. He used his credit as a way to buy love and loyalty from men who couldn't manage their own money. And when the bills came due, he panicked and looked for a new source of funds. Me. My phone rang. It was Glenn. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. "Ruby, we need to talk. Your mother is a wreck. We are looking at the numbers here, and because of this mess with Evan, our liquidity is dried up. We might have to put the house on the market. This is on you. Ruby, you caused this domino effect. If you have any conscience left, you will come over here and help us figure this out." I listened to the message twice. This is on you. I didn't call him back. Instead, I opened a new email draft. "Dad," I wrote, "I heard your message. You claimed that my refusal to co-sign a truck loan for Evan forced you to sell the house. If that is true, please send me the following documents so I can understand the connection. 1. Your household budget for the last 6 months. 2. Statements for all credit cards. 3. The terms of the HELOC you took out 3 years ago. 4. Documentation regarding the lien from Apex Building Supplies. If you can show me, with math, how my signature on a truck loan would have paid your mortgage, I will listen. Until then, do not blame your financial history on me." I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I started building the packet. I went to the office supply store and bought a black presentation folder. I printed everything: the credit freeze confirmations, the letter from the fraud department regarding the credit card application, the screenshot of the soft inquiry from the auto lender, the text messages from Sharon. "Hope you're happy. Just sign." The email from Glenn listing my childhood expenses, the public record of the lien, the timeline I had created. I punched holes in the pages and snapped them into the folder. It was 50 pages of evidence. It was a story of manipulation, fraud, and financial illiteracy. I added a final page at the very front, a summary. Statement of boundary. 1. I will not co-sign any loan, for any reason. 2. I will not lend cash to family members. 3. I will not accept liability for debts incurred by others. 4. I will not tolerate identity theft or the unauthorized use of my personal information. Woo. Woo. If my reputation is attacked publicly, I will defend it with the documentation in this folder. I closed the folder. It felt heavy. It felt like a shield. I wasn't going to sue them. I wasn't going to have them arrested. But I was going to make sure they knew that I knew. The power of their silence lay in the assumption that I would be too confused and hurt to see the truth. I wasn't confused anymore. Friday afternoon. The invitation came. It was a group text from Sharon. Included were me, Evan, Tessa, Aunt Linda, and my father. Family gathering. Sunday at 5 p.m. We are having a potluck. We need to come together and heal. There has been too much misunderstanding. Ruby, please come. We want to make peace. I read between the lines. Aunt Linda was included. That meant there were witnesses. They weren't inviting me to make peace. They were inviting me to a public shaming. They were going to corner me in front of the extended family, present their sob story, we might lose the house, and pressure me to write a check to save the family legacy. They needed an audience to make the guilt stick. I should have said no. I should have stayed in my apartment with my wine and my green spreadsheet. But if I didn't go, they would tell the story without me. They would tell Aunt Linda that I was mentally unstable and cruel. They would cement the lie. I needed to go. But I needed to go on my terms. I called Marisol. I'm going to the house on Sunday. I said, "Are you insane?" She asked. "Don't go back into the hornet's nest. I have to." I said, "I have to finish this, but I need a safety protocol." "Okay," Marisol said, her voice shifting to professional mode. "What is the plan?" "I am parking on the street," I said, facing the exit. "I am not parking in the driveway where they can block me in. I am arriving at 5 o'clock sharp. If I haven't texted you by 7 o'clock to say I am out, you call me. If I don't answer, you call the police and tell them there is a domestic dispute." "Serious?" Marisol asked. "Dead serious." I said, "And Marisol? If I text you the word file, you send the draft of the lawsuit we talked about to my lawyer." "Got it." She said, "Good luck. Ruby, don't drink the Kool-Aid." Sunday evening was cold. The wind stripped the last dead leaves from the trees on Elm Street. I dressed carefully, no comfortable sweaters. I wore my work blazer, dark trousers, and boots. I wasn't going as a daughter. I was going as a creditor. I placed the black folder on the passenger seat of my Civic. I pulled up to the house. The driveway was full. Evan's rental car, a small sedan, was there. Aunt Linda's minivan was there. Tessa's SUV. I parked on the street, 2 houses down. I locked the car. I carried the black folder against my chest. I walked up the path. The windows were glowing with warm, yellow light. I could see figures moving inside. It looked like a normal family gathering. It looked like the kind of scene I had yearned for just 3 weeks ago. But now, I saw the cracks in the siding. I saw the deferred maintenance on the roof that my father couldn't afford to fix because he was paying interest on a wedding cake. I stood on the porch and took a deep breath. I rehearsed the sentence in my head. I will not sign. I will not be threatened. I opened the door and walked in. The conversation in the living room stopped instantly. They were all there. My parents sat on the main sofa, looking like monarchs in exile. Aunt Linda was in the armchair, holding a glass of wine. Tessa was on the floor with Lily. Evan stood in the corner, looking at his phone, refusing to meet my eyes. "Ruby!" Aunt Linda cried, jumping up. She rushed over and hugged me. I stayed stiff. "Oh, honey, we are so glad you came. Your mom said you have been having such a hard time." I pulled back gently. "I am fine, Linda. Thank you." I walked into the center of the room. I didn't sit down. I placed the black folder on the coffee table. "Hello, everyone," I said. "Hello, Ruby," my father said. His voice was deep, performative. He was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch for Linda's benefit. "We are glad you decided to join the family." "I didn't decide to join," I said. "I decided to clear up the confusion." "Confusion?" Sharon said. A nervous laugh bubbling up. "There is no confusion. Honey, we just want to have dinner." "We can have dinner," I said. "But first, we are going to address the elephant in the room." I looked at Evan. He flinched. I looked at my father. His eyes narrowed. "You told Aunt Linda I was having a mental breakdown," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You told the community I was difficult. You told Evan I was the reason he couldn't get a truck. And you told me that if I didn't fix your financial problems, I wasn't part of this family." "Ruby, this is not the time," Tessa hissed. "Lily is right here. Lily is playing with her iPad." I said, "She is fine." I turned back to my parents. "I know about the credit card application." I said. The room went dead silent. The air pressure dropped. My mother's hand went to her throat. My father's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen. "I know someone in this house used my social security number to apply for a credit line on October 15th. I continued, "I know it was sent to this address, and I know it was flagged for fraud." Aunt Linda gasped. Sharon? Is that true? It was a misunderstanding, my father boomed. Standing up, he tried to use his physical size to intimidate me, looming over the coffee table. We were just testing the system. We were going to ask Ruby, but we needed to see if it was even possible first. It is a felony. Dad, I said, it is not a test. It is identity theft. How dare you use that word in this house? He shouted. After I put a roof over your head, after I paid for your teeth. I reached down and opened the black folder. I picked up the first page. The credit fraud letter. I am not using words. I said, I am using documentation. I held it up so Linda could see the letterhead. And I know about the lien. Dad, I said, the Apex Building Supplies lien. I know you co-signed for Uncle Jerry and got stuck with the bill. I know you are drowning in debt because you can't say no to people. And now you want me to be the life raft. My father looked like he had been struck. He slumped back onto the sofa. The wind was knocked out of him. He had relied on secrecy. He had relied on the fact that children don't check their parents' public records. Ruby, stop. Evan pleaded from the corner. Please. I turned to him. I surrender the truck tomorrow. Evan said, I already called them. It is over. You don't have to do this. I am doing this because you people won't stop. I said. I looked around the room. I looked at Tessa, who was staring at me with her mouth open. I looked at Linda, who looked horrified. I picked up the summary sheet from the folder. I am going to leave this folder here. I said, it contains the timeline of everything that has happened in the last month. The texts, the emails, the loan attempts. You can read it. Linda, you can see exactly why I stepped back. I placed the paper back on the stack. I love you all. I said, but I am done being the bank. I am done being the scapegoat. And I am done being silent. I turned to my mother. She was crying, but silently this time. The performance was over. Don't come crying when we are gone, she whispered, repeating her threat from the porch. I looked at her, and I felt a profound, aching sadness. I won't, Mom, I said, because I am already gone. I turned and walked to the door. Ruby, Aunt Linda called out. Wait. I didn't wait. I walked out into the cold night air. I walked down the path to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and checked the time. 5:25. I had been inside for less than 30 minutes. I texted Marisol. I am out. I started the engine. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the glowing yellow windows. I knew what was happening inside. Linda was reading the folder. Glenn was shouting excuses. Evan was staring at the floor. The silence was broken. The truth was on the coffee table, and I was driving home to my quiet apartment, where the only debt I owed was to myself. The drive to my parents' house that Sunday evening felt less like a commute and more like a tactical approach. The sky had turned a bruising shade of purple, the kind of twilight that feels heavy and final. I had the black presentation folder on the passenger seat next to me. I had checked the contents 3 times before leaving my apartment. Every screenshot, every letter, every timeline entry was there. It was my shield, and if necessary, my sword. I parked on the street, 2 houses down from the driveway. I saw Aunt Linda's minivan parked behind my father's truck. I saw my cousin Sarah's hatchback. They had assembled an audience. They wanted witnesses for what was supposed to be my capitulation. If I parked in the driveway, I could be blocked in. If I parked on the street, I retained the ability to leave. That was the new rule of my life. Always have an exit strategy. I walked up the concrete path. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, wet rhythm that seemed loud enough to be heard through my wool coat. But my hands were steady. I had spent the last 24 hours visualizing this moment, rehearsing my lines, preparing for the ambush. I told myself I was not a daughter walking into her childhood home. I was a consultant walking into a hostile boardroom. I opened the front door. The warmth hit me first. The physical heat of a house packed with bodies and the oven running. Then came the smell. It was the scent of performance, roasted garlic, heavy perfume, and the sickly sweet aroma of warm apple cider. Ruby. It was my mother. She came rushing out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was wearing her best blouse, a silk floral number she usually reserved for Easter. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright and frantic. "You made it," she said, reaching out to touch my arm. "We were so worried you wouldn't come." I didn't lean into her touch. I stood still, letting her hand rest on my coat sleeve like a foreign object. "I said I would be here," I replied. Come in," she said, ushering me toward the living room. "Everyone is so excited to see you. We have plenty of food." I walked into the living room. It was a tableau of forced normalcy. My father, Glenn, was sitting in his recliner, holding court with Uncle Mike and my cousin Sarah. Aunt Linda was on the sofa, balancing a plate of appetizers on her knee. Evan was standing near the fireplace, looking at his phone. He looked terrible. His skin was pasty, his shoulders hunched. He looked like a man waiting for a sentencing hearing. When I entered, the conversation stopped. It didn't taper off naturally. It was severed. All eyes turned to me. "Well, look who decided to join the family." Uncle Mike boomed. He was a loud, jovial man who had no idea he was sitting in the middle of a minefield. "Hi, Uncle Mike," I said. "Hello, Ruby," my father said. He didn't smile. He sat with his legs crossed, looking at me with a mixture of imperiousness and irritation. He gestured to an empty chair in the center of the room. It was positioned in a way that placed me directly in everyone's line of sight. "Sit down," he said. "Grab a plate. I am not hungry." I said. I didn't sit in the assigned chair. Instead, I walked to the edge of the room and stood near the bookshelf. I kept my coat on. I held the black folder against my chest. "Suit yourself," my father said. The next hour was an exercise in surrealism. The family ate. They talked about the weather. They talked about the Buckeyes game. They talked about Sarah's new puppy. My mother flitted around the room, refilling drinks, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. She was trying to spin a web of warmth, trying to glue the cracks in the reality with hospitality. I stood there and watched them. I saw the way Evan flinched every time someone mentioned his job. I saw the way my father checked his watch, waiting for the right moment to spring the trap. I saw the way Aunt Linda looked at me with pity, clearly remembering the story Tessa had told her about my breakdown. Finally, the plates were cleared, the coffee was poured, the room settled into a heavy, expectant silence. My father cleared his throat. He set his coffee mug down on the coaster with a deliberate clink. "All right," he said. "It is good to have everyone here. It has been a tough few weeks." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the relatives, gathering their attention. "You know," he continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a sermon, "family is the only thing that matters. Friends come and go, jobs change, but blood is forever, and in this family, we stick together. We don't abandon each other when things get tight. We circle the wagons." Aunt Linda nodded vigorously. "Amen. Glenn." My father turned his gaze to me. It was a heavy physical weight. "Ruby," he said, "we know you have been under a lot of stress. We know you have been confused about your role here, but we are willing to put that behind us. We are willing to forgive the silence and the hurt feelings, because Evan needs us, and we need you to step up." He reached down beside his chair and picked up a manila folder. He held it out. "I had Sharon talk to the finance guys," he said. "They came up with a solution. It is a loan modification. It lowers the payment, extends the term, and gets Evan out of the woods, but it needs a guarantor with a strong credit history to lock it in. Just a signature. Ruby, that is all it takes to fix this whole mess and bring the family back together." He held the pen out. The room was silent. Uncle Mike looked at me expectantly. Aunt Linda smiled encouragingly, as if I were a toddler being asked to share a toy. Evan stared at the floor. It was a masterclass in social pressure. He had framed it perfectly. I was the prodigal daughter. They were the forgiving parents, and all I had to do to earn my redemption was sign my name. If I refused now, in front of everyone, I would confirm every rumor they had spread about me being cold and unstable. I felt my heart hammering. but my mind was ice cold. I didn't reach for his folder. I reached into my bag and pulled out my own. I walked to the coffee table. I moved a bowl of potpourri aside and placed the black folder down. It made a solid, heavy sound against the wood. "I am not signing that. Dad," I said. The air left the room. "Ruby?" Aunt Linda whispered. "Don't be like that." I turned to look at her. "Linda, I love you. But you don't know the story. You only know the version you were told." I turned back to my father. "Before anyone asks me to risk my credit," I said, my voice clear and steady, "can we agree that we are going to tell the truth tonight?" My father's face darkened. "We are telling the truth," he snapped. "We are trying to save your brother's future." "No," I said. "You are trying to save face." I opened the black folder. I picked up the first sheet of paper. It was the timeline I had created. "Let's look at the facts," I said. "I am not going to use legal jargon. I am just going to tell you what happened. On October 14th, Evan asked me to co-sign a loan for $55,000. He told me it was a requirement because of a clerical error. That was a lie. He needed a co-signer because his credit score was too low to qualify for a prime rate." I looked at Evan. He didn't look up. "On October 15th, I went to the dealership. I continued. I read the paperwork. The truck was not $55,000. With the interest rate and the dealer add-ons, the total loan amount was $68,000. The monthly payment was $940. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Uncle Mike. "900?" he muttered. "For a truck?" I warned Evan that he could not afford it. I said, I offered to help him shop for a used vehicle. I offered to help him build a budget. I was told that I was selfish. I was told that I wanted him to fail. I turned the page in the folder. Then came the silence. I said, I was removed from the group chat. I was uninvited from Lily's birthday party. I was told that the family was taking space. That wasn't space. That was punishment. You were trying to hurt me enough that I would just sign the paper to make the pain stop. "Ruby, stop this," my mother hissed. She was standing by the kitchen door, her face pale. "You are making a scene." "I am not making a scene." "Mom," I said, "I am making a record." I picked up the next document. It was the letter from the credit card issuer. But the silence wasn't enough. I said, because on October 15th, the same day I refused to sign at the dealership, an application was submitted for a credit card in my name. I held up the letter. It was submitted using my social security number, my date of birth, and my full legal name. But it was submitted with this address, my parents' address. The room went deadly quiet. Even Uncle Mike stopped chewing. Aunt Linda looked from me to Sharon. "Sharon?" she asked. "What is she talking about?" "She is paranoid," my mother cried out, her voice shrill and desperate. "It was a mistake. We were just looking at options online. The computer probably autofilled her information because she used to live here. You know how technology is. Linda, Ruby is trying to turn a computer glitch into a crime." I looked at my mother. It was a pathetic lie, and we both knew it. Computers don't autofill social security numbers for people who haven't lived in a house for 8 years. "I already called the fraud department," I said calmly. "They confirmed the IP address, and I've already consulted with an attorney." My father stood up. "You called a lawyer? On your own family?" I looked him in the eye. "I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, Dad, and I have instructed my attorney that if there is one more attempt to use my personal information, one more application, one more soft inquiry, we will file a police report for identity theft." Gasps, actual gasps from the relatives, to people like Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike. Filing a police report against family was unthinkable. It was the nuclear option. "You wouldn't," my father snarled. "You ungrateful brat. I would," I said, "and I will." I turned to Evan. "Evan, tell them the truth." I said. He looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked at Dad, who was glaring at him with pure fury. He looked at Mom, who was weeping into a napkin. Then he looked at me. "I can't afford it," he whispered. "What?" Uncle Mike asked. "I can't afford the truck," Evan said, his voice cracking. He didn't shout it. He just let it fall out of his mouth like a broken tooth. I make $18 an hour. The payment is half my take-home pay. I lied about the refinance. There is no refinance. I am already behind. But, my father started, his face turning red. We have a plan. Evan, we just need the signature. There is no plan. Dad! Evan shouted. Suddenly snapping, he stood up, knocking his phone off the mantel. It is over. They are repossessing it tomorrow. The word hung in the air. Repossession. In the Powell family dictionary, repossession was a dirty word. It meant failure. It meant you were poor. It meant you weren't who you pretended to be. My father looked around the room. He saw the shock on Uncle Mike's face. He saw the confusion on Cousin Sarah's face. The image he had carefully cultivated, the image of the successful, benevolent patriarch with the successful children, was crumbling in real time. He turned on me. He needed a villain, and I was the only candidate left. You did this, he spat. You cold-hearted little witch. You came here to humiliate us. You came here to destroy your brother because you are jealous. You have always been cold. Ruby, you care more about your bank account than you care about people. I felt a sting of tears, but I didn't let them fall. I had cried enough over this. I am not cold. I said. My voice was soft, but in the silence of the room, it carried to every corner. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had itemized my childhood expenses in an email. I looked at the man who had put a lien on his own house to pay for a wedding he couldn't afford. I am not cold. I repeated, I am responsible, and I am done being cornered. I am done being the insurance policy for your bad decisions. You wanted me to sign because you needed someone to carry the weight of the lie you are all living, but I won't carry it. I turned to Evan. I walked over to him. He flinched, as if he thought I was going to hit him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. It wasn't for a bank. It was for a nonprofit credit counseling agency downtown. Evan, I said, I will not give you a penny. I will not sign a single piece of paper. But if you want to get out of this, I will drive you to this place tomorrow. He looked at the card. I will help you draft the hardship letter to the lender. I continued, I will sit with you while you negotiate the voluntary surrender so it does as little damage as possible. And I will help you make a budget so you can live on $18 an hour without drowning. I pressed the card into his hand. But that is it. That is the only help on the table. You have to do the work, and you have to stop using me as the solution. He looked at the card, then up at me. For the first time in years, I saw my brother. Not the construction manager, not the boss, but the scared kid who used to hide behind me when it thundered. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Ruby, I nodded. I turned back to the room. My mother was sobbing openly now, but no one was rushing to comfort her. Aunt Linda was staring at her sister with a look of dawning realization. My father was staring at the wall, his jaw working furiously, defeated by the one thing he couldn't bully, the truth. I picked up my black folder from the coffee table. Thank you for listening, I said to the room. I didn't say I was sorry. I didn't say I hoped we could work it out. I just said thank you. I walked to the door. Ruby? My mother wailed. Don't leave like this. I didn't stop. I opened the door and walked out into the night. The cold air felt like a baptism. It stung my cheeks and filled my lungs. I walked down the path to my car, my boots clicking against the pavement. Behind me, the house was buzzing. I could hear voices raised. I could hear Uncle Mike asking questions. I could hear the structure of their denial collapsing. I got into my Civic. I placed the black folder on the passenger seat. I started the engine. I checked my phone. It was 7 o'clock. I texted Marisol. I am safe. It is done. I pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back at the house. I drove toward the main road, toward my apartment, toward my spreadsheet, and toward a life that was quiet, solvent, and entirely my own. The rearview mirror was dark, but the road ahead was illuminated by my headlights, cutting a clear, bright path through the gloom. I turned up the radio, and for the first time in a month, The silence wasn't heavy, it was free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Family dynamics and money are two of the hardest things to navigate, especially when they get tangled up together. I would love to know what you would have done in Ruby's position. Did she go too far with the folder? Or was it the only way to stop the manipulation? Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this narration, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more realistic dramas. And don't forget to share your thoughts in English below. I read every single one. Stay safe and protect your peace.